So picture this for a second. You are a secular, totally non-religious scientist from the Netherlands.
Okay, got it.
And you decide to move to the American South.
Right.
But you do this in 2020.
Oh, wow. So, like, the absolute worst possible timing.
Exactly. The peak of chaos. And at the time, you only know Donald Trump as, that eccentric guy from The Apprentice.
Right, the you're fired guy.
Yeah. But then, within just a few years, you somehow become the face of this radical, conservative Christian movement back in Europe.
I mean, that is just such a massive shift. How does a worldview get completely rewired like that?
Well, that is exactly what we are unpacking today on The Deep Dive. We're looking at this incredibly in-depth YouTube interview.
Right, from the Dutch channel De New World.
Yeah, which translates to The New World. And the host, Talitha Moose, is sitting down with this woman named Rachel Hinds.
Who is now a really prominent figure in Turning Point Netherlands.
Exactly, which is a conservative youth organization with, very deep roots in the U.S.
So our mission today is really to unpack the anatomy of that ideological transformation.
Yeah.
We're basically tracing this journey from secular liberal atheism to conservative Christian activism.
Right, and it covers so much ground.
It really does. We're going to explore these profound culture shocks, the absolute limits of free speech, the modern family.
And some highly sensitive societal issues, too.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, let's just pause real quick because we are stepping into some intense territory today.
Yeah, we really are.
We're dealing with abortion, radical politics, the front lines of the culture wars. And we just want to be crystal clear with you listening. Our goal today is not to tell you who was right or who was wrong.
Exactly. We are not here to validate arguments or, endorse any particular side of the political aisle.
Right. Our job is strictly forensic. We just want to open the hood on these beliefs and show you how the engine works.
Impartial and unfiltered.
Exactly. So you can understand the perspectives that are shaping this massive cultural movement. Because the source material goes deep into both left-wing and right-wing ideologies.
And honestly, knowledge is just so much more valuable when we can step completely outside our own worldview, right?
Right.
When we can just analyze the mechanics of someone else's belief system.
Yeah.
We're looking at the how and the why.
Yeah, how different people perceive the exact same reality.
So to really understand Rachel's ideological shift, I think we first have to look at the physical environment that sparked it.
Her baseline, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So Rachel was a 35-year-old, non-religious Dutch woman working for the military.
As a radiodiagnostic technician, right?
Yes.
Right.
And specifically, she was deployed in Kabul, Afghanistan.
Wow.
So she is a woman completely steeped in empirical science. I mean, she spends her days looking at medical imaging.
Right. And the nature of that profession is actually a huge clue to her psychological baseline.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Because radiology is all about stark, undeniable facts.
Exactly. A bone is either fractured or it's whole. There's no political spin on a CT scan,
Right.
She operates in this world of hard biological facts. And she's doing this within a highly structured, intensely disciplined NATO military environment.
So order and objective reality are basically her foundational operating principles.
Right. But then we get the inciting incident.
The big shift.
Yeah. During the final 4 days of her deployment in Kabul, which is obviously this incredibly high-stress environment, she meets the man who eventually becomes her husband.
An American who was also deployed there.
Right. Fast forward a bit, they get married, and she packs up her entire life in the Netherlands to move to the United States.
And crucially, she makes this move in 2020.
Yeah, the timing there is basically the entire key to the lock,
I mean, 2020 was a global stress test.
to put it mildly.
You've got the worldwide COVID lockdowns, just upending daily life, the protests after the death of George Floyd.
Right, these massive, emotionally charged, nationwide protests.
And then this incredibly volatile, polarized presidential election on top of it all.
The societal fabric was essentially just vibrating with tension.
Yeah. And Rachel arrives right in the middle of this absolute chaos. But she arrives as a total blank slate.
Right, because she didn't grow up watching American cable news.
Exactly. She didn't have this tribal loyalty to Democrats or Republicans. The source material actually highlights this bizarre juxtaposition where she just couldn't fathom how the "you're fired" guy from TV was running the free world.
Yeah, it's so funny to think about. She brings this completely unconditioned mind into a highly conditioned environment.
And what she experiences is this phenomenon we talk about a lot, but usually in a digital sense.
Oh, the echo chamber.
Right, We always talk about algorithms on our phones feeding us curated content.
But with a digital echo chamber, you can just turn off the screen.
Exactly, you can block someone. But Rachel experienced a physical, inescapable echo chamber. She moved to a conservative area in the American South, meaning her neighbors, her new family members, her colleagues in the medical field, they were almost exclusively Republicans.
So it's a total inversion of her social reality back in the Netherlands.
Totally. And we usually assume people arrive at their political beliefs through, like, quiet, isolated study of policy proposals.
Yeah, like reading manifestos in a library.
Exactly. But for Rachel, it was this visceral reaction to the people literally standing right in front of her.
She looked around and realized that the successful, put-together, disciplined people in her immediate physical environment were all Trump voters.
And the behavioral contrast she observed is what actually triggered her ideological shift.
How so?
Well, she notes in the interview that the conservative people around her, the ones she viewed as having their lives together, they rarely brought up politics aggressively.
Interesting.
Yeah, they were just focused on their families and their work. But conversely, when she encountered people who vehemently opposed Trump, she observed a completely different behavioral pattern. She claimed they would frequently resort to insults or aggressive rhetoric within, like, the first 5 minutes of a normal conversation.
Oh, wow. So she's experiencing massive cognitive dissonance.
Huge.
Because the Dutch media narrative she had consumed her whole life portrayed the American right wing as these extreme, dangerous fascists.
You're right.
But her daily lived reality was completely backward from that narrative. The conservatives in her town were the calm, ordered ones, and the progressives she interacted with seemed chaotic and combative to her.
And proximity is just such a powerful solvent for media narratives.
Yeah, it really is.
When the person helping you with your groceries or the doctor working right alongside you belongs to this demonized political tribe, the caricature just shatters.
She was forced to reevaluate everything she thought she knew.
And the interview reveals she didn't necessarily fall in love with every Republican policy right away.
Sure.
But based purely on the behavior she was seeing in her physical environment, she just felt this profound alienation from the left.
Think about the mechanics of that for a second. I actually want to pose this to you listening. How much of your own political identity is genuinely born from pure, uninfluenced logic?
That's a great question.
Right. How much of what you believe is simply a product of your physical zip code and the social circles you inhabit?
If you were dropped into Rachel's exact geographical and social circumstances during the pressure cooker of 2020, how would your internal compass have calibrated?
Yeah. Ideology is incredibly fragile when you subject it to environmental shock.
It really is. Her transformation didn't begin with a political text. It began with a stark observation of human behavior under stress.
She gravitated toward the people projecting order in a time of chaos.
And that gravitational pull led her directly into a much broader ideological movement.
Right, which brings us to her discovery of Turning Point.
Yes.
Rachel's personal political awakening basically coincided with her exposure to Turning Point USA, which is this massive conservative youth movement.
Founded by Charlie Kirk when he was just 17 years old.
Yeah, and the origins of Turning Point are rooted in a very specific era of American politics.
Right. It emerged during the Obama administration.
Driven by this frustration that the traditional American dream was just slipping away from young people.
The original slogan Kirk created was actually incredibly blunt. Big government sucks.
Wow. Straight to the point.
Yeah, it capitalized on the feeling that student debt was crushing people, job markets were stagnant, and the federal government was just overreaching into everyone's daily lives.
So the source explicitly lays out the three pillars this movement was built upon.
Which are?
Freedom, family, and the free market.
Ah, okay.
It's a fundamental rejection of the state as the ultimate provider.
Right.
But as we were exploring this source material, we encountered this very jarring, intense claim about the origins of Turning Point Nederland.
The Dutch branch, yeah.
According to Rachel in the interview, the Dutch branch was formed specifically as a reaction to the murder of Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, we really need to pause right there and flag a massive anomaly in the source text for the listener.
Yes, definitely.
Charlie Kirk is alive.
Very much alive.
He is currently broadcasting, speaking, and actively running his organization today.
So why does the text say that?
Well, what we need to focus on is how the text uses the concept of his destruction.
Yeah.
The interview frames his intense campus protests, the violent pushback he receives, and the threats to his safety as this foundational martyrdom myth.
Ah, I see.
It basically posits that speaking conservative truths on a modern university campus is essentially a fatal endeavor.
That is fascinating from a myth-making perspective.
It really is. The text uses the idea of conservative voices being destroyed to prove a larger point about societal intolerance.
And Rachel actually connects this feeling of being under threat directly to historical trauma back in her home country, the Netherlands.
Yeah, the cultural parallels she draws here is critical for understanding the European conservative mindset.
Right, because in the Netherlands, the concept of political violence isn't abstract at all.
No, it's very recent history.
She points to Pim Fortuyn. Right.
Yes, Pim Fortuyn. He was this flamboyant populist politician who was actually assassinated in 2002, just days before an election.
And she also points to Theo van Gogh.
Right, a filmmaker who was murdered in the street in 2004 for his controversial critiques of Islam.
For an international audience, it's really hard to overstate how deeply those assassinations scarred the Dutch psyche.
Oh, absolutely. The Netherlands always prided itself on being this ultimate bastion of tolerance,
Yeah.
a place where anything could be debated over a cup of coffee.
Exactly. But the source uses the trauma of Fortuyn and Van Gogh to construct this narrative that Western society has completely lost the capacity to handle true freedom of expression.
The argument is essentially that the cultural left has completely abandoned debate.
Right. In this worldview, if you voice a dissenting opinion on, say, immigration or gender, society no longer debates your words.
They seek to utterly destroy your livelihood, cancel you, or, in those historical Dutch examples, physically eliminate you.
Okay, but wait. If you demand absolute free speech without any rules or boundaries, aren't you just inviting the exact chaos you're trying to escape?
That is the big question.
Because the turning point philosophy, as Rachel describes it, demands completely unvarnished freedom. We are talking about the right to burn a Quran in a public square.
Right.
We are talking about the right to openly call homosexuality a sin. Doesn't this level of abrasive freedom actively fracture a society rather than build resilience?
Well, the conservative argument presented in the interview actually tackles that exact tension head on.
What's the logic?
The logic is that the chaos is already simmering right beneath the surface, and polite speech codes merely put a lid on a boiling pot.
Ah, so you're just hiding it.
Exactly. And the moment you introduce nuance, like small rules to protect feelings or prevent offense, you essentially hand the state the power to decide what ideas are acceptable.
Right, which they see as dangerous.
In their view, true freedom requires the absolute protection of speech that society finds completely abhorrent.
Because if you only protect polite, universally accepted speech.
You don't have free speech, you just have state-sanctioned manners.
Wow. So a society's health isn't measured by its politeness. It's measured by its capacity to absorb massive offense without crumbling into violence.
Exactly. Furthermore, Rachel argues that when society reacts violently to controversial figures, it proves that the society is spiritually sick.
It isn't the fault of the speaker for being provocative.
No, it is the fault of the populace for lacking the emotional and moral fortitude to simply disagree and walk away.
That is an incredibly stark, uncompromising view of civic life.
It really is. It places the ultimate burden of emotional regulation entirely on the individual, not the state.
And that uncompromising demand for absolute truth in the public square doesn't stop at politics for her.
No, not at all.
She takes that exact same lens and turns it inward, pointing it directly at the private sphere.
Which brings us to a wildly provocative part of the deep dive.
Yeah. This conservative worldview fundamentally rejects the modern, progressive narrative about women, career, and the family.
We are entering the territory of what Rachel explicitly calls the feminist lie.
Right. She argues that women of her generation, keep in mind, she is a 35-year-old millennial.
Yeah.
She argues they have been sold a structural deception.
The lie being this deeply ingrained cultural idea that a woman's greatest possible contribution to the world is participating in the workforce.
Climbing the corporate ladder, generating tax revenue.
Exactly. The lie is that sitting in a cubicle is inherently more empowering and valuable than staying home to raise a child.
And her critique is as much economic as it is cultural.
Oh, it is heavily economic. She argues that Western society has been entirely restructured around the absolute necessity of two incomes.
Right. Housing prices, inflation, the baseline cost of living, they've all been artificially inflated.
Inflated to the point where a single-income family is basically mathematically impossible for the average working-class person today.
It's the two-income trap. Because everyone went to work, the market adjusted the price of housing to absorb both incomes.
Effectively mandating that both parents must work just to survive.
Right. And the consequence of this economic trap is that the fundamental raising of children gets outsourced.
Outsourced to institutions.
Daycares, early schooling.
And she really questions the baseline logic of this modern arrangement.
Yeah, she asks why society has decided that a stranger at a daycare facility, even, a highly qualified, well-meaning stranger,
Right.
why is that stranger somehow better equipped to raise a child during their most formative years than the child's own mother?
It's a profound question about efficiency versus attachment.
It really is. Think about it like this. If humanity was a corporation, raising the next generation would be our core product.
Right.
And we have essentially outsourced our core business to third-party vendors so that the parents can go generate GDP.
We gain economic efficiency, but she is asking, what is the ultimate cost to the culture?
And the source emphasizes the critical nature of those first 3 years of a child's life.
The psychological and emotional formation during that specific window is paramount.
Right. Rachel views the outsourcing of this period as a catastrophic failure of societal priorities.
We are trading the foundational psychological security of the next generation just for the ability to pay a dual-income mortgage.
And she illustrates this entire philosophy with this deeply personal, seemingly mundane anecdote.
Oh, the pacifier story.
Yes, the pacifier story.
It acts as this brilliant metaphor for her entire worldview regarding sacrifice and love.
Right. So she talks about realizing that her son's pacifier was harming his teeth.
So she made the executive decision to just take it away.
And what followed was 2 weeks of absolute misery.
Sleepless nights, a screaming toddler.
Sitting on the couch at 3 a.m., looking at her husband, just wondering how they were going to survive this sheer exhaustion.
But as she points out, he now has perfectly straight teeth.
Exactly. And she uses this brutal parenting struggle to completely redefine true love.
Right. Love, in her eyes, isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling.
Or a desire to make someone smile in the moment.
No. True love is a sacrifice that actively costs you something.
It is the willingness to endure deep discomfort for the long-term good of another person.
And this is a direct strike against the modern feeling-based definition of love, which she basically views as inherently selfish.
How so?
Well, if love is just about your own personal happiness, your own self-actualization, or this idea that the grass is always greener, then it isn't love at all, it's ego. Right. The pacifier anecdote represents the willingness to do the hard, unpopular, exhausting thing simply because it is the right thing.
And she contrasts this with modern parents who take the easy way out.
Right, handing a screen or a pacifier to a child just to avoid immediate conflict, ultimately harming the child's development in the long run.
Okay, I have to jump in with some practical reality here, though.
Go for it.
Advocating for a massive return to single-income, traditional families sounds nice in theory, but doesn't it completely ignore the harsh economic reality on the ground? Well, because houses are unaffordable. Groceries are exorbitant. Is the two-income household actually a moral failing of modern families? Or is it just the brutal mathematical reality of stagnant wages and inflation?
Right.
It feels a bit like blaming the victim of an economic system they didn't even create.
That is the primary counterargument, and it's a really powerful one.
Yeah.
However, Rachel's response in the source material flips that perspective entirely upside down.
What did she say?
She argues that we are looking at the problem backward. Instead of demanding the government fix inflation so we can afford our modern lifestyles on one income, she argues that the insatiable drive for material wealth has usurped the intrinsic value of the family.
So the problem isn't the cost of the house. The problem is our expectation of what a house should be.
Exactly. She points back to previous generations, her parents, her grandparents.
Right.
They lived in vastly smaller houses, often with multiple siblings sharing a single room.
They didn't have multiple cars.
No smartphones, no annual international vacations. They lacked all the modern luxuries we now consider absolute necessities.
Yet they maintained rich, fulfilling, cohesive family lives.
Exactly. She is advocating for a massive cultural mental shift away from hyper-materialism.
Right, because if a family accepts a significantly lower material standard of living, the single-income family suddenly becomes a viable option again.
And it's crucial to note here that Rachel is not pushing for some rigid historical cosplay.
Right, she's not saying women are forbidden to read or work.
No, she isn't advocating for a subservient tradwife existence.
I mean, she herself works in a hospital.
And she actively pursues further medical education. She openly appreciates that the feminist movement opened professional doors for women.
Right. What she is rejecting is the cultural mandate that a woman must walk through those doors and abandon the home to be considered a valuable member of society.
She is advocating for the nuclear family to be reinstated as the absolute cornerstone of society, superseding career ambition and material acquisition entirely.
In this intense focus on the family, on sacrifice, on the biological reality of human life, it leads us directly into the most politically charged and deeply personal segment of the entire interview.
We have to examine Rachel's personal experience with abortion.
Yeah. This is where abstract political theory becomes viscerally real.
This experience is the crucible that forged her current faith and her entire worldview.
And we really must approach this carefully, examining her psychological journey without projecting our own political bias onto it.
Definitely.
So, Rachel shares her story with incredible vulnerability.
She was married, and the marriage ended in a divorce.
A divorce she candidly attributes to her own pursuit of fleeting happiness, actually.
Right, that exact grass is greener mentality we were just discussing.
Following the divorce, she entered a casual dating relationship and became unexpectedly pregnant.
The psychological setup here is vital for understanding her transformation.
How does she describe herself at that time?
She describes herself as holding a very standard, modern, secular viewpoint. She personally felt she would never get an abortion for herself, but she vehemently supported the legal right of other women to choose it.
Which is a stance of moral neutrality disguised as tolerance, right?
Yeah.
Very common in liberal democracies.
Extremely common. But the abstract became reality very quickly for her.
When she told her boyfriend, the pressure began.
He told her he wasn't ready, that she couldn't ruin his life, that she couldn't do this to him.
And despite her own internal moral boundaries, that intense social and relational coercion pushed her to make an appointment at a clinic in Utrecht.
And she went through with the abortion.
And the aftermath, she describes, is not relief.
No.
It is a deep, paralyzing, agonizing depression.
She outlines a profound trauma that modern secular society often just lacks the vocabulary to categorize.
Let's look at the mechanics of her situation. She was legally permitted to have the procedure.
Right.
She was socially supported by her partner and the medical establishment in doing it. There was no societal stigma placed upon her.
None at all.
Yet internally, her own mind and body registered that she had committed a grave moral wrong.
She spirals into depression and seeks therapy.
And the turning point happens during her final session with her psychologist.
This part is wild.
She has worked through the surface-level issues, but she hits a wall. She tells her psychologist, "I can forgive everyone else involved in this, but I cannot forgive myself for what I did."
And her secular psychologist looks at her and says something astounding.
Wait, her secular psychologist said this?
Yes, a secular medical professional. The psychologist says, "You don't need me, you need God."
Wow.
It is a remarkable moment of clarity within the source material. A secular medical professional recognizing that the absolute boundaries of secular psychology had been reached.
The guilt wasn't a chemical imbalance.
No, it was an existential crisis.
And for Rachel, this statement struck like lightning. It was the catalyst that led directly to her Christian conversion.
She realized that the unbearable guilt she felt wasn't just a psychological glitch to be medicated away.
It was, in her newfound view, a spiritual reality, alerting her to a broken moral law.
Right, and she reinforces this spiritual realization with her empirical medical background.
Which is so fascinating because, remember, her day job is performing ultrasounds.
Exactly. She looks at fetuses inside the womb for a living.
She argues that medical science, the very black and white imaging she looks at on a screen every single day, proves undeniably that a fetus is a distinct human life.
She uses her medical expertise to highlight the arbitrary, almost absurd nature of democratic law when it attempts to define biology.
She points out the logical inconsistencies across different jurisdictions.
Right. One group of scientists says life begins at conception.
The legal system in one state says life legally begins at 6 weeks when a heartbeat is detected.
Another state says viability at 24 weeks is the threshold.
Another jurisdiction allows it up until 9 months.
She essentially asks, how can the definition of biological human life be subject to a flexible, shifting democratic vote?
Biology doesn't change based on which political party holds parliament. It is either a life or it isn't.
And the source highlights a terrifying contrast currently happening in the Dutch medical system to really hammer this point home.
The juxtaposition is so stark. Explain that part.
Okay, so In one room of a modern Dutch hospital, you have a team of highly trained doctors fighting desperately, utilizing massive resources and cutting-edge technology to save a premature baby born at perhaps 22 weeks.
But at the exact same time, in the exact same medical system.
The source notes a pilot program being proposed that would allow abortions between 22 and 24 weeks for social reasons.
Wait, social reasons? Like what?
Like financial instability, lack of housing, or emotional distress.
Wow, so in one room, a 22-week-old fetus is a precious patient to be saved at all costs.
And in another room, a 22-week-old fetus is a social problem to be terminated.
It induces profound cognitive dissonance on a societal level.
It really does, and Rachel brings her on-the-ground experience in the U.S. to bear on this as well.
Right, because she actively volunteers at crisis pregnancy centers.
Yes. She often stands on the sidewalk outside abortion clinics to offer women an alternative.
And from her thousands of interactions, she notes that a massive percentage of women seeking abortions are not doing so out of some fierce ideological desire for bodily autonomy.
They are doing so because of intense social and financial coercion.
From boyfriends, parents, or a society that just tells them they cannot succeed with a child.
And she notes a very specific phenomenon at these centers.
What happens?
When these women are brought into the crisis center and actually see an ultrasound.
When they see the undeniable medical imaging.
Exactly. When they see the life inside them, many of them immediately change their minds.
The visual, empirical reality pierces right through the political rhetoric they have been sold.
This entire experience leads to a massive philosophical implication.
Yeah.
The host of the interview, Talitha, brings this up, and it is a concept we really need to sit with and analyze.
Let me pose this directly to you, the listener. If a society gets together, votes democratically, and decides that a specific action is completely legal, heavily regulated, and morally neutral, as the Netherlands has done with abortion.
Right.
Why do individuals like Rachel still experience profound, debilitating moral trauma after participating in it?
Does the existence of that unavoidable internal trauma point to an intrinsic higher moral law that overrides whatever the state legislature says is legal?
This question is the absolute core of the Judeo-Christian worldview Rachel adopted.
It is the belief that the law of the land is not the ultimate arbiter of human morality.
In this framework, human beings are created with an intrinsic moral compass designed by a creator.
And when you violate that design, even if the government gives you a permission slip and society cheers you on,
your soul registers the catastrophic damage.
The fundamental idea is that legality does not equal morality. The state can make something legal, but it cannot make it right.
And the conservative Christian perspective argues that when a society forcefully separates itself from these foundational values, when it attempts to overwrite God's intended order with democratic votes based on shifting feelings, the result is unavoidable societal chaos.
Right. When humanity tries to write its own moral code, you get the fractured, burning world Rachel observed in 2020.
So we have journeyed through her geographic shock, the trauma of ideological violence, with the legacy of Charlie Kirk,
The economic realities of the modern family.
and the profound moral crucible of her medical and personal experience.
Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, execution.
Right. How does a person holding this intensely forged ideology actually operate in the real world today? Let's analyze grassroots conservatism.
To understand the modern conservative movement, you really have to look at the strategy of organizations like Turning Point Nederland.
You might assume their primary goal is purely political, right?
Like operating as an action committee, knocking on doors, telling people to vote for specific right-wing parties.
In the Netherlands, that would mean pushing votes for the SGP.
Which is a staunchly orthodox Calvinist party.
Or the BBB, that massive populist farmers movement that recently disrupted the whole political landscape there.
But that isn't their primary strategy at all. Rachel explicitly states that the ultimate solution to societal chaos isn't political, it is cultural.
The strategy is entirely bottom-up.
It focuses on the absolute, localized power of the individual.
Because the underlying ideology dictates that you cannot save a fracturing society by electing a charismatic politician to force top-down rules from the capital.
You save a society by changing how you live your own life in your own house.
It is the ultimate lead-by-example strategy.
Have children. Raise those children with traditional conservative values. Make personal sacrifices for your family.
The theory is that if you embody peace, order, and strong familial bonds in your own life, it will naturally become magnetic.
People who are drowning in the chaos, anxiety, and depression of modern secularism will look at your life, see your peace, and want it for themselves.
The guiding political philosophy here is that politics is always downstream from culture.
If you change the culture, one family, one neighborhood, one local church at a time, the politicians will eventually have to shift their platforms to capture those newly formed cultural votes.
It is a generational, decades-long strategy, not a quick fix for the next election cycle.
And we see this bottom-up philosophy manifesting in really interesting, highly specific, everyday ways.
The source material brings up the MAHA movement, Make America Healthy Again.
This is a fascinating sociological development.
It really is.
It represents the intersection of hardline conservatism with what used to be considered a very left-wing hippie aesthetic.
It is the horseshoe theory in action. The far right and the far left begin to look identical in their lifestyle choices.
It describes this massive growing trend of conservative women who are suddenly obsessively analyzing the ingredients in their food.
Their makeup, their children's shampoo.
They are outright rejecting the toxic processed products of modern corporate consumerism.
They are buying raw milk, baking sourdough bread, and demanding a healthier, more ordered, natural life.
We need to look at the psychological mechanism driving this.
Which is what?
Well, when institutional trust collapses, when you no longer trust the federal government, the mainstream media, or the pharmaceutical industry.
People naturally try to regain control over their immediate physical environment.
Analyzing the ingredients in your shampoo isn't just about being health conscious. It is a psychological coping mechanism for political and cultural alienation.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right.
You cannot control inflation or foreign policy, but you can absolutely control whether your child consumes red dye 40.
It is a withdrawal from the mainstream toxic system.
And Rachel also mentions applying this intense filtering process to her media diet.
Right. She explicitly controls the music she and her son listen to in the car.
Outright refusing to play songs with violent, highly sexualized, or misogynistic lyrics.
What is vital to understand is her motivation here, though. She states clearly that she doesn't want to ban the music.
She doesn't want the government to step in and censor the artist or shut down the record label.
Exactly. She is simply exercising her absolute individual right to protect the peace and order of her own home by refusing to consume the chaos.
It is a very robust, proactive form of personal agency. But as you can imagine, this level of cultural withdrawal, this insularity, and this deep reliance on religious values draws heavy criticism from the secular mainstream.
Oh, absolutely. There is almost a libertarian or even softly anarchistic thread running through all of this.
It is a complete and total withdrawal of trust from the federal government and mainstream institutions, replacing it with hyperlocal, familial, and religious control.
But critics, especially in the media, don't call it libertarianism.
No, they call it Christian nationalism.
And that is a term that carries immense historical and political baggage.
When the media uses the term Christian nationalism, it implies a dangerous authoritarian desire to use the violent power of the state to force Christian theology onto non-believers.
It evokes imagery of theocracy and the complete suppression of minority rights.
So how does Rachel defend against that highly charged label in the source material?
She deconstructs it entirely as a media scare tactic.
Okay.
She views the term Christian nationalism as pure clickbait, a boogeyman designed by the press to terrify secular voters into supporting the left.
To her, what the media ominously labels Christian nationalism is actually just normal Christians simply living out their faith authentically in the public square.
It is families prioritizing their children, eating healthy food, rejecting toxic cultural inputs, and going to church on Sunday.
In her view, if non-Christians observe that ordered, peaceful, disciplined lifestyle and voluntarily decide to adopt conservative, family-centric values because they demonstrably work better than the chaos of secularism.
That isn't a nationalist, authoritarian takeover.
That is just a better idea winning fairly in the free marketplace of culture.
It boils down to the belief that the Judeo-Christian framework is not merely a private religious preference, but the objective, optimal operating system for human flourishing.
When a society aligns with that system, it thrives. When a society deviates from it and tries to invent its own morality, it fractures.
Man, we have covered massive ground today.
We really have. We have unpacked an incredible, complex journey.
We started with a radiodiagnostic technician experiencing the chaotic, disorienting environmental shock of moving to America during the powder keg of 2020.
We explored how the legacy of a youth movement and the perceived violent suppression of free speech hardened her political resolve.
We examined the profound economic and cultural critique of modern feminism.
Unpacking the two-income trap and the controversial re-elevation of the traditional nuclear family over corporate ambition.
We navigated the incredibly sensitive, deeply personal trauma of abortion, contrasting democratic legality with the concept of a higher intrinsic moral order.
And finally, we looked at how this forged worldview is manifesting today as a grassroots, bottom-up cultural movement.
Focused on health, family, and hyper-local personal responsibility, rather than waiting for political salvation.
It is a comprehensive anatomy of how a worldview is constructed.
Brick by brick, experience by experience, trauma by trauma.
And regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, understanding these deeply held perspectives is absolutely vital.
Because these are the underlying currents that are actively shaping the cultural and political landscapes, not just in the United States, but echoing forcefully across Europe as well.
If we just dismiss viewpoints we disagree with as crazy, evil, or incomprehensible, we completely miss the underlying human experiences that built them.
We miss the opportunity to understand the hidden mechanics of our own society.
Which leads us to a final thought experiment for the listener.
Yes, I want to leave you with a lingering question, building directly on Rachel's profound realization about the difference between legality and morality.
Let's hear it.
Think carefully about the laws in your own country right now. We have been socially conditioned since kindergarten to equate what is legal with what is morally right. But imagine a scenario where the laws changed tomorrow. Imagine if a Democratic majority voted to permit and celebrate something that you, in your deepest gut, find absolutely horrific.
Would your internal moral compass dutifully shift to align with the new law? Or would it hold steady in defiance of the state?
Where does your baseline of right and wrong actually come from if it isn't simply handed down to you by the government?
That is a question that sticks with you long after the conversation ends.
It really is.
And maybe the answer is muddier than that clear white line on X-ray we talked about at the very beginning. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep questioning the world around you.
Keep looking past the headlines, keep learning, and we will see you next time.